be agreed to. And I give the call to the member for Ryan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Problems with Australia's current industrial relations framework were highlighted by Labor's Fair Work Review panel and various Productivity Commission inquiry and other reports, and illuminated further through a never-ending caravan of federal court cases, as well as the recent Royal Commission into trade union governance and corruption. There is not just a series of isolated spot fires in Australia's building and construction industry, there is a raging bushfire, fuelled by the commercial and other interests of union bosses and the inherent conflicts of interest for those who represent them in this place. Parliament's approach to making and policing industrial laws should not make lawful or acceptable in Australian workplaces what would otherwise be bullying, intimidating, threatening, illegal, violent, corrupt and criminal. The coalition government stands on the side of the workers, employers and the independent judiciary. Mr Deputy Speaker, Australia is poorly served by those who would simply outsource Australia's industrial relations policy and practice to serial offenders who have an attitude of indifference to compliance with the requirements of our laws. This is now the second time in as many years that the Building and Construction Industry Improving Productivity Bill 2013 has been before this House. It is a key government policy. It was an election commitment at both the 2010 and 2013 federal elections. Few could doubt this government, indeed this parliament, received a clear mandate from the Australian people to make the important changes contained within this bill. The Coalition committed to re-establish the Australian Building and Construction Commission in order to return the rule of law for commercial building sites and construction projects right across Australia, as well as increase productivity. The body of evidence supporting the need for these changes is compelling. It is growing with every unlawful trespass, every unlawful strike, every unlawful union stop work, every judicial intervention and legal remedy. Mr Deputy Speaker, make no mistake, it is costing money, it is reducing productivity, it is increasing costs and is costing jobs. Mr Deputy Speaker, I was a member of the Coalition's working group tasked with examining the construction sector, which included recommendations to promptly re-establish the Australian Building and Construction Commission. The main object of the bill is to provide an improved workplace relations framework for building and construction work to ensure that it is carried out fairly, efficiently and productively for the benefit of all building industry participants and for the benefit of the Australian economy as a whole. Government must protect and maintain the rule of law and, wherever possible, drive productivity and economic growth. I note the Productivity Commission inquiry into workplace relations frameworks deliberately stayed away from the criminal aspects of Australia's industrial relations framework because it was the subject of the Royal Commission into Trade Union Governance and Corruption. It did, however, make a salient observation, which takes us back to the future, citing the Cole Royal Commission, which acted as a catalyst for establishing the Australian Building and Construction Commission over a decade ago. The Productivity Commission pointed out that industrial action over safety issues was increasingly a Trojan horse for other objectives. It observed that some types of unlawful activities can give parties leverage in an industrial dispute by inflicting or threatening to inflict substantial harm, which may be economic or personal, on the other party, unless the offending party's demands are met. The Productivity Commission pointed out that this was a significant problem in some sectors, especially the construction industry. It even provided broad examples of the unlawful conduct, which included delaying or blockading of workplaces and sites, bullying, verbal abuse and other coercive conduct and unlawful entry to sites. Mr Deputy Speaker, there's an old saying that you cannot be a slave to two masters, and those opposite are most assuredly parroting lines scripted by their CFMEU bosses. The Royal Commission into Trade Union Governance and Corruption argued the suggestion that the need for specific industrial regulation cannot be justified by criminal conduct occurring within the industry is misplaced. And I quote, It ignores the fact that a lot of the criminal conduct for which union officials are responsible arises in the context of breaches of industrial laws, either because it occurs in the course of contravening industrial laws or because it constitutes a criminal contempt of orders of a court restraining contraventions of industrial laws, and out of a culture of defiance of all laws. It also ignores the ability of a dedicated industrial regulator to assist police through referrals and information sharing in combating criminal activity within the industry. Mr Deputy Speaker, Labor is seriously conflicted when it comes to industrial relations matters because the commercial and other interests of their biggest financial benefactors are not always in the national interest. With specific regard to the ongoing and flagrant abuses of Australia's industrial law framework and practice, the Federal Court points out that union officials' misbehaviour is, and I quote, coordinated and strategic. They went on to say, it is fair to describe the CFMEU record as dismal. The record indicates an attitude of indifference by the CFMEU to compliance with the requirements of the legislation regarding the exercise of rights of entry. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is clear the Australian industrial framework needs a stronger cop on the beat, especially in the building and construction sector. This bill re-establishes the Australian Building and Construction Commission to regulate the building and construction industry and provides for its functions and powers, including those of the ABCC inspectors. This is great news for the many members of my electorate who pleaded with me to do whatever I could to stop unions dictating the terms and conditions of operation for their businesses. One constituent informed me that because he chose not to sign the CFMEU's EBA, the union prevented his business from receiving any jobs in Brisbane. For this small business, union threats resulted in a net financial loss exceeding $500,000. Unnecessary interruptions, intimidation and disruption caused by unions on his building sites were the norm. Evidence presented to the committee in preparation for this bill 2 years ago is also consistent with the recurring themes presented in evidence and testimony to Fair Work Australia, the courts and the Royal Commission into Trade Union Governance and Corruption. Aggressive and militant union behaviour is commonplace.
Order. The debate is interrupted in accordance with Standing Order No. 43. The debate may be resumed at a later hour and the member will have leave to continue her remarks at a later hour.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As I was saying, aggressive and militant union behaviour is commonplace. Site shutdowns, strike action and other industrial action occur regularly. Unlawful industrial action over safety issues is increasingly a Trojan horse for a union delegate's other purposes. We heard that it is not unusual for someone wishing to trigger a site shutdown to fabricate a safety incident, even tampering with electrical boards. Coercion and bullying are stock and trade for many union officials. Like the Federal Court, we know construction union representatives behave as if they are above the law, routinely ignoring court orders. And through these improper practices, the CFMEU and other unions leverage even greater power to bring into effect an unlawful no-ticket, no-start union recruitment policy and practice for head contractors and through them onto subcontractors and across the industry through pattern bargaining. Mr Deputy Speaker, some union delegates exercise control over what should otherwise be commercial decisions and even exert control over detailed operational issues, including whether a site operates beyond core hours and procurement and tendering. There is ample evidence of subcontractors who are not retained by head contractors because they are not on a union-approved list. Indeed, this is what happened to many of my constituents. Some union bosses even extend the put-it-on-the-credit card approach to proceeding with industrial action, even if they know it is not permitted under the Fair Work Act. Like all Australians who have watched the Royal Commission into Trade Union Governance and Corruption unfold, we learned coercion is a common feature of union behaviour in the construction industry. It can involve threats and intimidation, verbal abuse and distribution of material making derogatory, belittling, untrue or defamatory statements about individuals and companies. We know union intimidation tactics involve threats of physical harm and, on occasion, physical assault. Mr Deputy Speaker, the CFMEU's treatment of some of my constituents is shamefully common across the building and construction industry in Australia. Non-CFMEU members are bullied and labelled scabs. A retired couple who used their life savings to set up a shop in a local centre in my electorate tried to save money by doing their own fit-out. Their shop was picketed, they were spat on and called scabs and worse, and prevented from entering their own property. Those opposite know what has been going on for far too long. The silence and inaction by those who sit opposite also makes them complicit. The CFMEU's actions are often in open defiance of the Fair Work Act and Supreme Court orders, but with no strong enforcement body, the unions continue to wreak havoc. Indeed, something I hope the new ABCC will look into is how court-ordered fines are paid, because I know of cases where the union had to write a cheque to a successful litigant, but the litigant did not bank it because of the threat of further reprisals if they did. This speaks volumes about the licentious attitude towards the law and absolute contempt for the courts, as well as the lawless culture in some unions, especially the CFMEU. Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill restores the full power of the Australian Building and Construction Commission and the funding that Labor took away. This bill brings back integrity to this industry. This bill upholds and promotes respect for the rule of law and ensures respect for the rights of all building industry participants. It contains provisions to ensure that unlawful action, including unlawful industrial action and unlawful pickets, are dealt with appropriately. The bill includes the ability for the courts to impose significant penalties for individuals and organisations that participate in unlawful action. And importantly, the bill provides an effective means for investigating and enforcing the law. The Australian Building and Construction Commissioner will be able to exercise their power to obtain information quickly and effectively without being hindered by unnecessary bureaucratic red tape around the issue of examination notices. However, to ensure accountability and transparency, the use of these powers will continue to be reviewed and reported on by the Commonwealth Ombudsman. Mr Deputy Speaker, the operation of the Australian Building and Construction Commission contributed to improved productivity in the construction and building sector. This bill encourages productivity and the pursuit of high levels of employment in the building and construction industry. It will ensure that the government's policy to deliver the infrastructure of the 21st century is delivered on time and on budget. This bill will create jobs and investment by ensuring employers and workers in the industry can get on with the job without fear of intimidation. The Office of the Federal Safety Commissioner and the Building and the Construction Work Health and Safety Accreditation Scheme are maintained. And there are also a number of changes in this bill from the original legislation which reflect the changing scope and practice in the building and construction industry. The definition of building work in the bill includes off-site prefabrication of made-to-order components for parts of buildings, structures or works. The definition of building work also includes the transporting or supplying of goods to be used in building work. This is a change from the previous ABC legislation and is included to ensure that large resource construction projects cannot be indirectly disrupted through coordinated go-slows on the supply of materials to those projects. The bill also extends the geographic limits to the exclusive economic zone and land above the continental shelf, which will bring the legislation into line with the Fair Work Act. Mr Deputy Speaker, Australia is poorly served by those who would simply outsource Australia's industrial relations policy and practice to serial offenders who have an attitude of indifference to compliance and the requirements of our laws. Australia cannot afford to have a building and construction industry which is inefficient and unstable. We must protect and maintain the rule of law and, wherever possible, drive productivity and economic growth. I commend this bill to the House.